Hi, this is Janine Koczwara from Prima, and I'm just going to bring you a tutorial showing a bit about masking and a little patchwork technique. So I've taken a 12 by 12 page from the ledger paper range, and I'm using an 8 by 8 mask, and I'm just going through using Ranger Distress Ink and the Distress tool and just pressing firmly as I apply that ink to the page around the mask, and just hold it in place as you're doing it. And what I do to extend this rather than just using as an 8 by 8 is I mask around, adding that colour down to the last floral element on the mask before you hit the corners, and then I move the entire mask down and line up the top one before you hit the corners onto the last one we did, and that just helps to try and line them up slightly to try and make it as seamless as possible, and then just continue masking the rest of it. And what you should end up with is essentially a mask now that's 8 by 10 inches. And when you have a look at it on the page, it's not perfect, but it's pretty close to it, and you probably wouldn't notice at a glance that it's not, that the image doesn't flow perfectly. But then I've gone back in, and you can line up the mask again and add a little bit more colour. So I wanted that inside with a bit darker colour. So I've just gone back, replaced the mask in those spots, added a bit more colour just to get a bit of more definition where that mask is concerned. And as you can see, it's given me a really, pretty nice 8 by 10 inch mask area. Now I've taken the papers from the A4 paper stack with the Pixie Glen range, and then I'm going to cut them down to 6 inches, and I'm going to run them through my scissors machine, and using this cute little patchwork die that I've had for years and years, and I've actually put like most of the sheets together and run it through on the one thing with that die, because it's one of the original size dies, so you can actually do quite a number of layers at once with that particular die. And then I'm just sort of working on placement here. I knew I wanted it on the side of the page, but then I sort of worked, did I want the scallop side facing inwards or outwards? And in the end I thought, no, I like the edges with the scallops facing inwards and the edges flush with this edge of my page. Then using walnut stain distress ink, I've gone round and inked up the edges of all the individual patchwork pieces, and then gone through with my distress tool. And because it's a lighter weight paper coming with the paper book than it is when you use the individual cardstock sheets, I'm using the fine side of the rasp, like the distress tool. It's just a little bit gentler, and you've got less likelihood of tearing or ripping that paper more than you actually want to when you're distressing. And with the inked edges on it and then that little bit of added distressing, it just gives each individual piece a little bit more definition to stand on its own, even though it's all part of that group. Now I'm just using a bit of Helmar 450 glue, and I'm just adding it mostly to the finer, like the thin end, and then sticking them down by butting them up against each other. Now I've left the scalloped end of it a little bit more open through the centre bits, because I know I actually want to push a bit of paper in underneath and a bit of the photo underneath that. Now I've also taken another sheet out of the book, and I've cut with my scissors around an area to then run through the Sizzix a Spellbinders Parisian motif die, and I left the actual images intact rather than just cutting and randomly doing it, because I want to use those to hand cut out later. This die is fairly intricate, so you just got to be careful when you take it out. Then I inked the edges and stuck it down, and I just folded the excess around the corner. Now we've just then gone back to some of those elements of the floral design on the Pixie Glam papers, and I'm just using scissors to hand cut them out at the moment. And just as many of those images, like so many of them were very appealing, so I hand cut out most of them on the papers that I'd already chosen to use, and then I've just begun to arrange them on the page, just seeing how I like it, how much I want to flank the photo and the photo mat with these hand cut images. And I've taken the corner piece with the roses, and I've actually cut that down into a smaller segment, and often you'll find that you can't use it necessarily as it is, and you might want to just chop off bits or use bits here and there or make it smaller, like I have done so here. There was also a very cute little pixie sitting on the side, so I've chopped that out as well, and I'll end up using that on that patchwork section as a little additional embellishment on the page. And then going back in and just working out little other bits of hand cut elements and sliding them in just as an additional layers in places, and just checking where they fit and adding those little bits and pieces into this clustered area on the patchwork side of it. Now I'm just cutting the photo mat down. I do want a little bit of a gap between the side of my page and the photo mat, and then once again I'll just quite heavily use the walnut stain distress ink around the edges of this piece. I find that on such delicate paper it just adds a little bit more definition on the borders of that and just helps it come and have a bit more presence on the page. And then I've just taken the hand cut element I did earlier and just stuck it down with some Helmar 450, sliding it under the patchwork section, and then I often go back with my fingernails and just pull up the little tips of those floral elements I just stuck down, and it adds a little bit more interest to the whole design and a bit more detail when you see it in real life. Now I've decided to use a Cinderella vine on this page. I love the fact that it's not just the mulberry paper with this vine, with the texture of the beading that creates it. It adds so much more texture and interest to the page, and also a little bit of sparkle through it as well. And then I'm just working through some charm roses that from the Fairy Bell collection, and running that down the vine and just spacing them out and clustering them to make a pretty built up vine from that Cinderella vine, and adding in also some special edition bulk roses that I have as well, just for a slightly bigger cluster at the top end of that vine. Now it's a very pretty and delicate and pastel sort of page, and I thought with the femininity of it I'd really like to try just using some of the satin pearls. And I've taken this gorgeous swirl and I've cut it in half, and then I'm just working out placement of it, and I think it looks best if I have part of the swirls on the lower half underneath the vine, and before I've stuck down that vine I can then place it in, peel back the backing off it when I'm satisfied where it's sitting, and then stick it down underneath, and it will just add a really pretty little sparkle to the whole page, and also just build in the layers that come from that floral cluster within the patchwork base underneath that as well. Now with the vine I also just use the 450 glue on it. It's really good because it sticks firmly, but it also still allows a bit of flexibility in the page as well with that, and you don't have to hold it too long with the quick dry aspect. And then I also use the same when I'm adding my floral cluster later, and I tend to find I'll push those bases in quite firmly at the base of those flowers and hold them in, and because the bases are going inwards together it pushes the top part outward a little bit, and it just sits really well if you keep the bottom edges of it quite firmly pressed in together when you're putting that cluster together. Now I'm just going to stamp my favourite part stamp from several releases ago with this little butterfly. I'll do it across a few different colours and then cut out a couple of them from each of those stamped images, and then cluster them across the page just to give a feeling of their flying across the page. They're so pretty and really wonderful to use on feminine pages like this. And then just adding in some of the Prima alphabet stickers. Now that I'm using the black ones here, and so I've got a bit of part of the title at the top, then I added some to the bottom just to balance that out. Then the Say It in crystal centres, I used the largest one on the top part of the butterfly, and then the smallest one of the same colour just below it, just for a bit of sparkle. Now this is my favourite product for adding to my pages. It's a Winsor & Newton watercolour iridescent medium, and I've just applied it to the wings of the butterflies, and then I've gone back and applied it to the tips of the flowers for a gorgeous little sparkly effect. So as you can see, it all comes together on a page, and you can see the masked effect coming the top and bottom. So thank you very much for watching this tutorial, and I really hope you enjoyed it.